Good morning, Judge Barrows. We are ready to hear your opening comments.
All right. Thank you. I want to thank you, Justice Wiggins, and the members of the Commission for serving in this capacity. You've given considerable time and energy to this very important task, in this case, under unprecedented circumstances. While I did not have a face-to-face meeting with any of you this time, having just done so in January, I do want you to know that I truly enjoyed visiting with each of you in the past. Everyone in this commission is an interesting and accomplished person, and I never would have met most of you absent this process. A little bit about me. I am proud to be a small-town Iowan, raised by small-town Iowans. I grew up in Fawlitz and Comanche, both in Clinton County. Most of my family still lives in that area. My parents were children of the Depression who worked hard and eventually built a successful family business. I am the first in my family to go to college, conscious of the sacrifices of those who made that possible. All of this informs my character and fuels my work ethic. If fortunate enough to be appointed, I hope to take what I have learned to the Iowa Court of Appeals. I am married. My wife Karen is an attorney for the United States Army, and I must admit, probably a better lawyer than me. I have two children, Ellie, age 11, and Max, age 10, who are the inspiration for much of what I do and for what I hope to accomplish. Of course, there are two questions most asked when one applies for this position. Why do you want the job? And how would your appointment enhance the court? And I'll try to address both. My reasons for applying are to deal with the important and sometimes cutting-edge issues that come before the court. As all of you know, the vast majority of cases in this state end with the ruling in the Court of Appeals. It is that court that fleshes out the law in terms of the day-to-day application of Supreme Court precedent. Indeed, there are many issues on which only the Court of Appeals has spoken, and those cases are often cited to and guide the district courts. It is, of course, the Court of Appeals that reviews the work of the district courts, and it is my belief that the court needs additional members with district court experience to more effectively do so. And on a more personal level, I am applying to make my family proud and to set an example for my children, showing them what is possible through hard work and determination. How would my appointment enhance the court? I have considerable experience as a litigator, appellate advocate, and judge. I have civil and criminal experience in state and federal court. And I believe that the exacting standard of practice in federal court has contributed to making me a thorough and prepared jurist. I have handled cases of considerable complexity, including numerous sophisticated criminal prosecutions in the challenging environment of federal court. I do believe that the Court of Appeals could benefit from the perspective of someone with this type of criminal experience. After all, an enormous percentage of their caseload consists of direct criminal appeals and post-conviction relief actions dealing with criminal law issues. I was both the computer hacking and intellectual property coordinator and Project Safe Childhood coordinator for the Southern District of Iowa. This afforded me the opportunity to become trained in and experienced with cutting-edge issues of electronic evidence and computer forensics, including the complicated topic of privacy in the age of the internet. This training and experience would be valuable to the court as it continues to grapple with those issues. I have presided over more family law trials than I could possibly count. This experience is important as a significant percentage of the court's work consists of reviewing those cases. I have also been the drug court judge in the 7th Judicial District for the last 2 years, having just recently rotated out of that position. This has been a profound experience that has given me insight into the challenges faced by those in our criminal justice system who struggle to break the grip of addiction as they attempt to rehabilitate their lives. This has informed me as a district court judge and would continue to do so if I were fortunate enough to be appointed to the Court of Appeals. My experience as a writer, appellate advocate, and judge has given me the ability to craft opinions in a useful, clear, and concise manner I think this is tremendously important to making the court's rulings more accessible and helpful to the public, practitioners, and judges. I have never been on the 60-day list. In fact, 2 or 3 weeks was the longest it ever took me to produce a decision. And that was after a week-long bench trial involving numerous complex business issues. I normally have my decisions out in 1 or 2 days. I think that my chief judge and district court administrator would both tell you that I am one of the most efficient individuals in the 7th District, always willing to cover another county on short notice, and willing to fill in on a case when someone calls in sick. I routinely work the queue on my own to help the administrative judge, or take other random assignments to help my colleagues, and I believe that is what they would tell you. Finally, I believe that I have demonstrated a patient, thoughtful, judicial temperament while on the bench, a solid work ethic, and a firm grasp of the issues. I make certain that litigants have been heard and that they feel that they have been heard. My many and varied life experiences leave me quite conscious of the frailty of the human condition. I have an appreciation for people from all walks of life, and that is something that I would hope to bring to the Iowa Court of Appeals.
Thank you, Judge Barrows.
Thank you.
Mr. Gray, do you have any questions?
I do, Your Honor.
Can you pull the microphone? And don't push the button, please.
Thank you. Judge, early this morning, I listened to a voicemail from one of your, well, it's from a law professor, who wanted me to know that you wrote an opinion that was 80 pages long, that was so well written that he uses it as part of his instruction in his class. That's the brag part. The tough question is this. It's obvious you love the law and like to write about it, but the Court of Appeals requires you to make a lot of quick decisions. Would you be frustrated only being able to make those quick decisions rather than being more scholarly?
Well, there's plenty of quick decisions that one has to make at the district court level. I know the opinion that you're referring to, the case was Curry's Transportation. That was an unusual case. In fact, it's the case that I referred to in my opening remarks. So I'm well aware that not every decision is going to be Curry's Transportation. Most of the time at the district court level, you have to make decisions. You have to make them quickly. What people have always told me is that we just want a decision. We want somebody to find the facts, apply the law, make a decision, do it quickly. People need to get on with their lives. Attorneys have their practices to run. I try to keep that in mind and to keep things moving. So Curry's is a bit of an anomaly. I know that on the Court of Appeals, it's a nose to the grindstone type of job. You have to find the efficiencies in the process. And I think that's something that I'm pretty good at and have always been pretty good at. When you're doing that job, you need to keep things moving. I recall Judge Doyle saying at one time that they had to do an opinion in approximately every day and a half. Well, you're not going to sit there and ruminate and ruminate and ruminate on every one of these cases if you're going to do a decision in a day and a half. So going into this, I fully understand that.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Mr. Harbach? Ms. O'Brien?
Thank you for being here, Judge. Your history and ability and accomplishments as in the area of criminal law are obvious and well known. I guess my question is would you feel comfortable in the other high volume areas of the Court of Appeals of family law and juvenile law I'm echoing John Gray's question a little bit in turning out the high volume that needs to be addressed in those areas where maybe you don't have quite as much experience?
No, and thank you for that question. Obviously, that's something that I want to address. And in criminal law, I think my experience speaks for itself. The other areas that I think the court primarily deals with are family law, and obviously I have fairly considerable experience in that area at this point. Civil administrative appeals, we don't see those quite as often in the 7th Judicial District. excuse me, but we still do those. So I have experience with those civil administrative appeals as well. And then, of course, juvenile court. District court judges in the 7th District don't do much juvenile work. The only time that we do juvenile work would typically be when we go cover one of the smaller counties and something's set on the docket and someone needs to cover it. So you do what you do in that situation. You learn what you need to know and you deal with the situation. Obviously, I've dealt with a lot of practice areas that involve children, prosecuting child exploitation offenses, doing child support recovery work, doing family law work, so it's not an area that I'm completely unfamiliar with. And obviously, you also deal with juvenile offenders in the adult criminal system sometimes. So I'm not concerned about my ability to learn the law in that area and deal with the volume. You know, those are de novo reviews. You sit down, you review the material. The law is not tremendously complicated, and then you make your decision. Thank you.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes, good morning, Judge, and thanks for being here. One of the things that we discussed in our phone conversation a few weeks ago was challenges that the Court of Appeals would be taking up in the future. I asked you kind of what you saw some of those being. Would you like to talk a little bit about what you see as issues that the Court of Appeals will take up and what you would bring to that process?
Well, mostly the work of the Court of Appeals is applying settled law. You know, I understand that. The Supreme Court is going to deal with the novel issues the majority of the time, other than to, as I suggested, where the Court of Appeals has to flesh out those decisions. So that's where you can get into novel areas, for example, in the application of a decision the court might have handed down in the search or seizure area, Article 1, Section 8. Beyond that, I think the things that the court might see first before they get to the Supreme Court, if they do, would be the electronic evidence issues, the cybercrime issues, the privacy issues that I referred to, the parameters of the search of a computer, the search of a cell phone, those types of things, I think are really burgeoning issues that all of us are going to have to deal with. And I think that's where my experience would be particularly useful.
Ms. Conover?
No questions.
Mr. Bloom?
No questions.
Mr. Goodman?
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Barrows, the docket for criminal on the Court of Appeals is about 38%, and you've had 17 years as a prosecutor, both at the county attorney's office here in Polk County and the U.S. Attorney's Office. I think there are 4 or 5 total prosecutors that have applied for this job.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like to ask you is, how would the Court of Appeals be different, or how would their decisions be better informed with you or another prosecutor serving on the Court of Appeals and issuing opinions related to criminal matters?
Well, I think it's always useful to have the perspective of someone with considerable experience in that particular area. I mean, for me, it's state court and federal court, and I think at a fairly sophisticated level. Obviously, one of the things that you're thinking about when you decide those cases are what are the practical implications of this decision. I think that's one of the areas where it's particularly helpful to have a former prosecutor in the room to talk about not only how is this going to affect defendants, but how is it going to affect law enforcement as they go about trying to do their job. It's just part of the discussion, and I think it's important to have someone who's had that experience with members of law enforcement to add that perspective to make sure that the issue is fully fleshed out.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Diekma?
No questions.
Ms. Sinclair?
How do you think your IT expertise could enhance the court?
Well, I just think, as I mentioned, those are issues that are going to continue to come up. some of the things that I'm aware of are, for example, in a computer search, okay, when you get a search warrant, is it for the entire computer, or is it for particular sections of the computer? Is it for certain files in the computer? Those are issues that the courts have been struggling with. The same issues, I think, are gonna come up now with respect to cell phones. Maybe the more complicated issues are issues of, for example, how far is a search warrant gonna be necessary to obtain GPS data? Is it gonna be necessary to obtain cell tower data? The federal courts have dealt with this to an extent, but I'm not really aware of many, if any, decisions by the state court, particularly on the latter couple of issues at this point. So I think that's a way that I could be helpful.
Mr. Sukup?
No questions.
Mr. Bevel?
No questions.
Ms. Law?
No questions.
Mr. Diaz?
Judge, you were appointed in 2012.
Yes.
Could you tell me the number of applicants for your position? And then, in the follow-up, have you seen I can tell you that I've seen in our district the number of applicants dropping.
Yeah.
I think that is an issue that is not just subject to that district. I think it's sort of statewide. Could you speak to what reasons do you believe exist as to why we're getting less and less applicants at the district court level?
I can't tell you exactly how many applicants there were at the time that I was appointed. I actually had applied more than once and came out of the commission for the district court position 3 times. And I want to say that the number of applicants ranged anywhere from 12 to 18. I know that the last time we had an opening, the numbers were up a little bit, and we were encouraged by that, but generally they had been down for quite a while. Obviously, pay and resources are 2 of the reasons that we think that the applications might be down. Obviously, why you do or do not apply is in the head of every potential applicant. Certainly, I think those are issues, and I think it's a matter of concern, for sure. We want to see those numbers up. Even though it's more competition for me, it's still encouraging to see 30 applicants and good applicants for these 2 positions.
Thank you.
Mr. Berger?
No questions?
Ms. Bowden?
No questions.
Mrs. Pearson?
Yes, how do you feel your experience how do you feel your experience and interaction with the drug court would enhance and add value to the appeals court?
Well, I think any experience that humanizes the job for you more is beneficial. All right, I think I've always been a pretty empathetic person. One of the comments that I made in my opening remarks was along the lines of, I'm very aware of the frailty of the human condition. And frankly, doing the job of a prosecutor as many years as I did made me vastly more aware of who really is a bad guy and who isn't, and the wide range of behavior and culpability that exists in that large spectrum. Drug court, for me, was important to add to that knowledge base by showing me just some of the difficulties that people have to deal with to try to rehabilitate themselves. Jail fees, court costs, driver's license suspensions, all of those things that I think in kind of a bygone era would get through the legislature because, you know, there was a tendency to say, we're being tough on crime, look what we've done. I think now, on a bipartisan level, we understand that some of those things don't work, and if we really want to rehabilitate people, we need to be more conscious of what it takes to make that happen, be it removal of some of those unnecessary impediments, or better methods to treat the problems of addiction and mental health issues. The jail system and the prison is unfortunately not a very effective mechanism for addressing those issues. Although I will say, in a plug for the Scott County Jail, they have an extraordinary number of jail programs that do try to address those issues. But still, for a lot of those folks, we need a better way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Barrows, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.